Kee-hyun Kim, and I am streaming to you live from my office slash music room in Arlington, Mass, just north of Cambridge. It's a little bit discombobulating. I have my laptop on me and then my iPad here with the chat box, and so a little bit discombobulating, not knowing where to look. I don't even know if there are people in the room, but I feel like I'm speaking into a void, but hopefully there will be opportunity for engagement, and please type in any sort of questions or comments about the cello, about music, about what I do, about what you do, or anything like that. I would love to hear from all of you. It's been a while since I've been on CelloChat. I was telling Will, the administrator, that the last time I think was in the thick of the pandemic, and what a great thing to have going for, I guess, some sense of continuity as we're all sort of shut down in our homes, to have this sort of video medium as different and sometimes frustrating as it is. I think it has been a godsend and a silver lining, and I hope that everybody has been using these virtual mediums to their benefit and not feeling too limited by the capabilities. Let me just check this chat. Okay. Let's see. Like I said, my name is Kee Kim. I am the cellist of the Parker Quartet. We are currently in residence at Harvard University, the music department, where we coach chamber music, and we present 4 concerts a year in Payne Hall. We visit a lot of classes and work with composition students and composition faculty, visit the dorms or the houses as they're called, or we used to before the pandemic hit. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do so again, and basically sort of interact with the community here. The first question that I see: where do you teach and perform in the summers? Well, for the past 3 summers, including this pandemic summer, we have been teaching at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity in Banff, outside of Calgary in Canada. And that's a 3-week program, and we our quartet and 2 other quartets, the Eibler, which is a period quartet, one of the violinists of which is Aislinn Noski, who's the concertmaster of Handel and Haydn Society in Boston. So an early music quartet or period quartet, and a new music quartet, the Jack Quartet, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know. So the 3 of us are the faculty, and they invite 4 composers as well to work with, and they have a rotating list of faculty composers, some of whom are there for the whole 3 weeks, and we work with the students, the student composers, or I should call them the participant composers and the participant quartets, on new pieces that are being written by the composers, and also other pieces that they're working on. And so it's a really great opportunity for them, hopefully, to get feedback from the perspective of a period ensemble. And I know that they work on a lot of students bring Mozart, Haydn, even Schubert and Beethoven, and sort of to get that perspective of a period, of playing that on period instruments, and with that aesthetic, and with the Jacks, obviously, who approach things from a new music perspective, and from my quartet, the Parker, where we sort of straddle both worlds. And so hopefully it's a good experience for them. I know that it is great for us. Last year, obviously, we were all virtual, which is less than optimal, but it was still a very meaningful experience working with, I think, 3 or 4 participant quartets and 4 participant composers as well. Question from Harry: can you talk about practicing and how you help your students organize their sessions and stay inspired? Sure. that's sort of a very wide-ranging topic. Let's see. How do you organize their sessions and stay inspired? You know, I think as you know, as anybody who's taught and being on the receiving end of teaching as well, we all know that practicing is rarely effective when it feels like we have to do it, when it feels like it's work, and it feels like we have to do something because we need to get something ready. And when we're practicing, when we're not inspired, it's really doesn't feel like work. And I feel like that really inspires bad habits. And so I think I tell, my college students and younger students that I've had before that, you should really, even if you're only practicing 10 minutes or 15 minutes, hopefully more than that, but however long you're practicing, you should really make that very, very focused and disciplined and efficient, right? So I know when I was in high school and in college and stuff, like, how much I practiced was sort of a measurement of time. Oh, I practiced 3 hours today, or I practiced 5 hours today, I practiced all day. But then I feel like now, having a kid and having teaching obligations and, other, performances and rehearsals and all that stuff, I have to be very, very efficient with how I practice. And so even if I practice an hour, I think even before I practice, I will go into the session being organizing what I'm going to practice, even if it's not just, and I try to be as detailed as possible. It's not just the first movement of this. I'm going to work on the development of this piece or of this movement, or I'm going to work on this one section, or I'm going to work on this one section with metronome and build it up. And I really find that having that sort of focused approach is so much better than just sort of running through things. And then just sort of if every session that you have, you start by running through it and until you stop and then try to fix that, that only ingrains bad habits. And also it's not the most efficient use of time. I think running through things, there's a time and place for that. But whenever you can, to practice as most efficiently as possible, I think is the best thing to do. And going to your other point, staying inspired, I think by focusing your energies in this way, you can see measurable progress. And to see progress, obviously, is gratifying. And I think that sort of keeps you inspired to know that, oh, I can nail this shift almost every time now because I've broken it down and practiced it meticulously for 10 minutes. I feel like is very rewarding, at least to me, and hopefully to you guys as well. Let's see. Question from Sarah. Who have been some of your most memorable mentors and or collaborative partners? What did you take away from your time with them? I'll use that question as an opportunity to plug my quartet's latest album. We came out with, we recorded 3 pieces on the ECM label, I want to say maybe almost 3 years ago, definitely before the pandemic. And it finally came out Friday. That was the release. And on that CD are 2 pieces by the Hungarian composer George Kurtag, his Six Moments Musicaux and his Officium Breve. And I'm getting to the question. And also Dvorak Viola Quintet with violist Kim Kashkashian. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard her name. She's on faculty at NEC, but she's an amazing pedagogue, just an amazing artist and musician. And one of the reasons we wanted to play with her is we've played with her often and collaborated with her over the past few years, several years. She was one of the quartet's early mentors, and she, what I really, really enjoy about her is her sort of no-nonsense approach. She's very nurturing, but also if you don't sound good, she will tell you. But also She will tell you how to make it sound better and offer, give, good practical advice, as well as, approaching it from angles that we haven't even thought about. So obviously Kim has been a great mentor. Paul, I can't, no discussion about our mentor is complete without mentioning Paul Katz, who's been such a great teacher, cello teacher to me, but also a great mentor to my quartet from the very beginning stages. And some of our most inspiring collaborative partners also has been at the Harvard Music Department. There is an artist named Vijay Iyer. He's a jazz pianist, but he's so much more than that. He's a social activist and just an all-around smart, engaging, inspiring guy. I worked on one of his solo pieces called Run. You guys should check that out. And, it's always great to get inspiration, not just from, people in your field, but also maybe just a little bit outside. A couple of weeks ago, we played a concert with Claire Chase, who is a flutist, not just a flutist, but an amazing collaborator and artist and just a communicator. And I've learned so much just by playing with her. We play Anthony Chung's flute quintet, and just the way she is able to communicate her intentions to an audience through her music, through the gesture, through her musical intention is so inspiring. And I learned so much from her and from all the other collaborators we work with. Let's see. Question from Peter. How did you begin and develop your pedagogical skills with regards to coaching younger chamber groups, and how have they evolved over time? How have I developed my pedagogical skills? Man, I think as with anything else, right? The more you do it, the more the better you get at it, and the more sort of tips and you find out what works and what doesn't. I've learned a lot by teaching our students at Harvard. In the introduction at the beginning, I said that as part of our residency at Harvard's music department, my quartet coaches and runs the chamber music program. And usually we get anywhere from 50 to 60 students. So anywhere from 10 to, I think we had to cap it at about 15 groups. These are not students for the most part who will go on to have careers in performance. There are some who are exceptional. But I think, just they join our course and they take orchestra and they take chamber music because they want to keep up their skills on their instrument without necessarily having to take weekly private lessons, and B, because they want to have some sort of social collaborative endeavor. And I feel like tapping into their enthusiasm for playing together is sort of the basis, and then sort of working towards creating something as a group really focuses their work. And so in the course, we have a number of ways to get them to sort of hone their inner ear and to listen critically to themselves, one of which is a critical listening assignment, where we have them listen to 3 different recordings of the same piece and sort of try to compare and contrast. Then we ask them questions about, interpretation and taste, and, what sort of, about tempo and balance and all these things. And I think just really, with playing chamber music, an important aspect of it, we spend so much time in our youth just sort of sitting in the practice room, learning our own instrument and learning our craft. And when we go into lessons, usually the communication is one-sided, where the teacher will tell us, this is what you need to do, this is how you can get better, and we listen and we try to apply all that. And then we go into a chamber music, and going to an orchestra rehearsal, right, is sort of similar to that, where we listen to the conductor and we try to conform and be a unified presence. But in chamber music, you know, we spend an hour with these students a week, maybe an hour, hour and a half, and then we send them into the practice room and be like, hey, figure it out, and you need to work. And so a lot of it is just sort of having them know how to speak to themselves, to each other, to how to be critical without being insulting or disrespectful, how to give constructive criticism, how to receive constructive criticism, how to be flexible in their perspective, and be open to trying other ideas, and really how to create something together as a group. And I feel like really in chamber music, those are the most important skills. Obviously, we need to, you know, practical things about unifying tempo, unifying, phrase length, or how you think about a phrase, or, you know, bowings, or, you know, balance. All these things are things they need to think about and talk about. But I think once they know sort of what aspects of music that they need to listen for, I feel like that they can sort of through trial and error sort of figure that out themselves. So I feel that my role as a teacher is to really just give them the tools, the vocabulary to know how to talk about music, and to be aware of what to listen for. So that's sort of a very general answer to your question, but hopefully that was helpful. Okay, comment from 정호. 안녕하세요. 한국에서 듣습니다. 감사합니다. Okay, nice to meet you as well. That's Jungho from Korea is saying hi. So hi. Question from Lisa. Do you have any strengthening exercises for the left pinky? I find that it is much more difficult to get leverage and power on that finger. Any advice? Yes, I have advice. I assume you mean the pinky here of the left hand. And so if you look at my hand and if you look at your hand, everybody's hand is going to be more or less the two fingers here. The first and second finger are the longest and the strongest, at least for me. And then we have our third and fourth finger. And for me, the fourth finger, probably for a lot of you guys, is the weakest because it is so short compared to the other fingers. And so when we're playing the cello, I find that a lot of students that, they put their first finger down, second, third, and fourth, right? From sort of this angle. And I remember doing this exercise too, really trying to get a lot of leverage and trying to, slam my pinky down. And it reminds me of a story of, I think it was Schumann who would tie weights to his fingers to strengthen them, and he ended up injuring himself. But anyways, so instead of thinking that we're using this knuckle here to try to put our pinky down, I compensate for the shortness of it by throwing the fourth finger down. It's sort of this left hand thrust. It's caused by the pronation of the forearm. So instead of going like this, you can see that I'm just using this pinky or this knuckle. I bring my pinky to the level of the fingerboard by doing this motion, by throwing it down, right? So this is me just using my knuckle, not very strong. You probably can't even hear the string. But if I'm doing that, I'm not even using this knuckle at all. I'm basically throwing the pinky down, and the hand shape is stable enough that even if I throw it down, there's a good chance I will hit that note, the note that I'm aiming for. And so you can do it with the first finger, obviously it has the most leverage, second finger, and then, using the third finger as sort of a pivot point. So even when I'm playing like this, I'm sort of exaggerating the motion. Yeah, so I always encourage my students to make exercises for themselves. I think it keeps the practice fun and inspired. So you can sort of something like that and practice this motion of sort of throwing your pinky onto the fingerboard. And that should allow you, first of all, it frees up this tendon right here. You'll notice if you're working so hard with your pinky that it gets really, really tight. I'm sure a lot of you guys, when you play maybe something fast, which requires a lot of dexterity, even when you find that this part of your forearm getting tight, and I believe it's because we don't loosen our arm, our hand, by throwing the pinky down. We're sort of rigid like this. Yeah. So I encourage you to really just try that at home. Just try this action. It's kind of like, I don't know, turning a doorknob or something. Just sort of get that pinky. It's not really about strengthening the pinky. The pinky is plenty strong. We just have to get it into that that position of strength. Great. Question from Chris. You collaborate with many different players, sometimes with little rehearsal time, I assume. What do you think about and how do you approach playing with new players, especially strings? What do I think about, I love playing with collaborators. It's been the four of us in the quartet for so long. And so whenever someone joins us, it's great. And I find that an opportunity to learn from them and to, and it's really fun playing, pieces that we know with different collaborators. For example, we played Schubert Cello Quintet this past summer at Lake Champlain Chamber Music Festival up in Vermont, Burlington, Vermont, with the cellist Marcy Rosen. I'm sure you guys have all heard of her. She's an amazing musician. Lives in New York, I believe. And this was my first time playing with her, and our first time, I should say. And, a lot of her thoughts about tempos, about bowings, we just sort of didn't question. We just sort of, it's like, she would suggest, like, why don't we try this? Like, okay, let's try that. And I find it just a great opportunity to just try different things. Obviously, they come with their own perspective and their own experience, and I feel like it's a great opportunity to just try it out and see what we like, see maybe what we don't like, and sort of further keep honing our own sort of sense of taste. And it's definitely little rehearsal time. I think with Marcy, we had a lot of time, actually. It felt like too much time. We had, I think, maybe 3 rehearsals that were 2 hours each or something like that. But, if you know the piece and you know how your part fits with everything else and you know your role within, and you're always listening and being flexible and spontaneous with your listening, I don't think you need so much rehearsal time as long as you feel secure with yourself and in your own playing. And sometimes I know we've presented stuff maybe 2 summers ago. We played with the pianist Orion Weiss. It was for Rockport. I believe it was during the pandemic as well. And so he was coming up from New York. We were coming up from Boston. And because of the pandemic, it was so much of a logistical nightmare for him to stay anywhere or for us to rehearse the day before even. So he basically drew up the night before, and we met him the morning of the concert. And basically we ran through every movement. Maybe we had a 2-hour rehearsal, but we've played it so many times. Orion has played the Dvorak a lot. And so it was just sort of, in our rehearsal, we were just like, okay, this is the tempo. Maybe I want to take this rubato here. Take it a little faster here, just sort of working out the very general things, and then leaving it to trusting each other's ear and knowing that everybody is listening in the moment. And that was really one of the most exciting performances we had played in a while. And I think the performance went well too, but without the benefit of having rehearsed something, I think just feeling spontaneous with it, with a piece like the Dvorak, which we've played so many times, I feel like keeps it fresh and was really exciting. So anyways, question from Thomas. I sometimes find it difficult to do bowing patterns involving repeated 16th patterns with 1 separated and then 3 slurred, and then 3 slurred and then 1 articulated. The fast section, for example, fast section of the slow motor Beethoven Opus 18-2 feels clumsy. Let's see. Let me just pull that up actually. Slow motor 18-2. Do I have the music? I do not. I'm looking at my iPad. I don't have the music. But okay, so let's see. Bowing patterns involving then 3 slur. That kind of stuff. Okay. I think it sounds like it's an issue of bow distribution, right? If it's 1 2 3 1 1 2 3 1 or 1 1 2 3 1 2 3 4, right? So we have bow speed and bow density, right? And of course contact point as ways to affect our sound, but in particular with bow speed and density, we can sort of equalize imbalances in our bow distribution. So let me give you an example. So I've used this much bow for 3 strings. So I find that a lot of students actually, they have da 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 da, and then they'll end up here, right? And that makes sense because you're spending much more bow on those 3 notes. So what do? So maybe you try not to spend so much bow on those 3 notes, but then use your arm to sort of get you back as close to where you want to be for the next collection of notes. So with the 3, I have a certain speed and a density. So faster speed, maybe a little bit less density. Right? If I had too much density, then I would get that sort of accent. But if I sort of balance it out, or the other way is a little bit easier because I can just use bow speed to get to where I want to be, maybe the middle of the bow, and then use the remaining bow, equal amount for the remaining 3 notes. Yeah, so it's all about just sort of using your arm and feeling very nimble with how you use. So try dum ba bum ba bum ba bum and yup bum ba bum ba bum ba bum, right? So sometimes it's easier to do away from the cello. So just try that, air bow it 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 4 1 2 3 4. Okay, and then yeah. So hopefully that'll help you. And I think it will feel clumsy, but if you feel very sort of, nimble in your arm, with your arm and making sure, and I keep on saying arm because I don't want anybody to think that they have to. You want to just sort of use the whole arm to get the bow where you want it to be. Okay, question from Jason. Among today's students in school, what do you think is the most overlooked or least refined skill on the cello? Oh man, it's hard to make any sort of generalized statement about that. But one thing that I do find very common, which I'm sure a lot of teachers do as well, is I feel that vibrato is too automatic. I've certainly gotten that comment when I was in school, and it's something that I've thought about a lot. And I want everybody to think of vibrato as an additional tool, right? And I tell all my students what actually makes sound on the instrument. It's our bow, right? And so we can do whatever we want with our left hand here. And, obviously there's going to be some kind of sound, but unless we apply the bow we don't give voice to those words. I think, was it Casals that said these are the words, but this is the voice, the bow is the voice. So anyways, so all of that is in lieu of saying, try to make as many colors as you can with your bow. I sort of alluded to it with, with the way we can create differences in color and nuance with our bow speed, with bow density, how much weight we're placing on the bow, and contact point. Something here is going to sound very different, right, than something down there. And so already those are different colors, right? And so from there, I like to make the analogy that with the bow, if we can create a 24 box of crayons, then with our vibrato, we can fill in all those shades between the primary colors and, add all these different layers of lights and darkness within those primary colors. So this is a 24 box, and this is maybe 240, 120 box with their vibrato. So I think vibrato is something that I notice in individual cello lessons that needs to be thought about, and in chamber music that people just sort of they're playing all the right notes and it's more or less together, but it sounds really separate, and I'll look and everybody will be playing with different sorts of expression in their left hand. And so I think I'll always tell them, try that passage without vibrato, and automatically that just sort of focuses the way they listen by taking away one element. And I'll have them do it over and over until I feel that they have found that sense of unity with just using their bow without any vibrato expression. And then I'll tell them, try add just as much vibrato as you need, but nothing more than that. And I find that that's a good exercise. A lot of vibrato, I feel like, especially with younger students, is very automatic. They'll just, start vibrating, and it's sort of mean to say, but in a way it's kind of thoughtless, because as I said, the vibrato creates, the speed and the width, the amplitude of the vibrato creates so many different nuances and subtleties of expression that even just working with one type of vibrato obviously is not conducive to finding variety in your tone and your sound. So I encourage everybody to sort of think what they can do with their left hand and without vibrato to create a lot of nuance in their sound. Okay, thank you, Jason. Question from Elizabeth. Could you talk about the art of learning a piece that is completely new to you? Where do you start, and what are some of the processes that carry you to the performance? Man, there's two answers to that, I think. One is dealing with pieces that are in the classical music canon that maybe I'm not familiar with. For example, the one Beethoven quartet that the quartet hasn't worked on or performed is 1805. In our 20 years together, we've never had the for some reason that's been missing. And so a piece like that, when we do begin to work on it, I believe in the spring, we can use all our knowledge of past Beethoven quartets and the way he uses his language, the context in which he wrote the pieces, and not just in the quartets, but what else he was composing during that time, our knowledge of his notation, all these things to inform our interpretation of a piece like that. The quartet also works, the second part of that answer is perhaps when we're working on new pieces of music by composers that are being written today, or have been written within the past even 50 years or something like that, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And for example, the quartet worked on a new piece, it's not a new piece, but new to us, Zasha de Castri's first string quartet. She's a Canadian composer. She teaches at Columbia University in New York. And she wrote a solo cello piece, which is really, really cool. I encourage all of you guys to check it out. It involves a lot of extended techniques and stuff like that, if that's of interest to you. But she wrote a string quartet several years ago, I think for the 2016 Banff competition. So, she wrote for the quartet and for the Jack Quartet a string octet 2 or 3 summers ago, which sort of was our first introduction to her music. And so we really enjoyed it, and so we decided to work on our first string quartet. And we've been playing it all throughout the fall, but really that's just sort of, sort of the similar process as we do approaching someone like Beethoven or someone who's much more established in our ears, is just sort of getting familiar with her other works. So checking out her other pieces, not just for string quartet, but for other pieces as well, to get a sense of her aesthetic. Oftentimes I feel composers that are writing extended techniques have, explanations, a whole glossary of terms and stuff like that. For the most part, a lot of them have been standardized, but each composer has their specific way of asking for a specific extended technique. So sort of familiarizing yourself with that. And then sort of, I guess, as you work through the piece, sort of asking yourself, is this sort of a melodic function? Is it more gestural? Is it just sort of like this, or is it like this, or is it, or is it more harmonic, or is it just sort of, a musical event of a lot of noise where something comes out of it, or, just finding the intention of the gesture, or the or even just the intention of a single note, right? I think helps me to helps me in the smaller sense, and then if you step back away, then you can sort of get a understanding of that composer's specific language. For example, I said at the beginning of this session that we released an album which includes 2 of Jörg Kurtag's works for string quartet, and this is a man who famously writes very, very minimally. Is that the word? I guess. His pieces are often no longer than 10-15 minutes at most, at least his smaller ensemble pieces, but they have, and there's a lot of silence. Sometimes there's just 2 notes or 3 notes that he's working with, and so, but then because it's so minimalist, really finding the intention behind maybe a 2-note rising gesture, or, for example, is the key to sort of unlocking or interpreting his music. But it took me a while to realize that was his aesthetic. I think maybe 2006 was the first time I was exposed to Kurtag's music, and it was so different than anything that I had been exposed to before. I think probably the closest piece to it would be pieces by Webern, perhaps, which are very, very short and full of intention and meaning as well. So I guess really just figuring out the composer's aesthetic, figure out how they notate things, would be a start to approaching any piece, whether it's by Mozart or by, something written yesterday. Okay. Question from James. Thank you for this cello chat. Do you have any advice on how to properly center one's vibrato to get the core pitch of the note, i.e. no wobbling? Yes. Sure. So let's see. It's hard for me to wish I could do a poll or something, but let's see. Usually I'll ask my students what direction they think vibrato goes, right? So I'll give them a chart like this, and I'm writing it down. A, B, C, option A, B, and C. Okay, so Okay, so here we go. So this is a chart. So here's option A, B, and C. The line indicates the note without vibrato, and these waves obviously are the amplitude of the vibrato. So I'll ask students, which way do you think vibrato goes? Does it go above and below the note? Does it go below the note and below the note and to the note, or does it start at the note and go above? And it's, if you think about it, think about it now. And I feel like often when I was posed a question in college as well, my answer was it goes above and below. So let's say that note is A. So that's going above and below the note. So let's try it in real time. Right? So that's what that sounds like, going above the note. That's what that sounds like. And then going below the note. Okay, so I can't hear you or have any way of knowing, but the correct answer is most often B, right? Where the note goes, and not all the time, but I would say, most of the time, the note, this is the note, and the vibrato goes below and then to the note and back to the note, and that's what we hear of vibrato. And we say why vibrato, then we go even further down, and narrow vibrato less further down, right? But it usually more or less returns back to the note that you're starting, that note that is specified. So if we're all in agreement that that is indeed the case, then we can sort of devise exercises to sort of solidify returning back to the note. So I'm sure everybody has heard or done this exercise. I'm not sure if you can hear, but the note is A, and I'm going below as slow as I can, trying to mimic the motion of the vibrato. Again, it's caused by the arm, not by the knuckle. Right? And then I'll speed that up. So like I said before, you can think of creative ways to make up exercises or little etudes for yourself. And one thing that I find really helpful is to put on a metronome. I have it at 64 right now. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'll place it over here so it's not by the microphone. So I'll start with so you heard from 1 and then 2 oscillations, and then 3. I'm sorry, yeah. And then 4. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then maybe 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So that's just sort of, allows you to gain more conscious control of the amplitude of your vibrato, and just sort of training your muscles to feel a certain way. And so I would maybe try that exercise, and then make some up on your own too. I think that'll be fun. And try with each finger, 1, 2, 3, 4, and try it slow, slow vibrato. You can try all these without the metronome as well. The metronome just helps it keep it consistent. Try really wide and fast, try really narrow and fast, slow and narrow, which is a little bit harder, but all these things. And if you keep at it, again, in a very disciplined and efficient way, then I have no doubt that your vibrato will improve. Great, thank you, James. Question from Anna. Do you have any tips for reducing unwanted or unintentional portato, but still being able to bring out the clarity of each note? Yeah, I think that portato usually happens when we don't know where we're going in a phrase. Let's see. What is a good phrase? Right? Even something like that. Let's say we're going to the sea. Right? So if we have that awareness of where we're going, then we can pace out the bow so that we're where we want to be for that last note. But if we don't know where we're going, like when we're sight reading, right? I feel like when I'm sight reading sometimes and looking at something for the first time, I get really tight because I'm not pacing out, my shifting or anything like that. And with the bow too, a lot of bad habits come out because I'm not quite sure where to go with the phrase, right? So if I know I'm going to that C, then I can pace it out. If I don't know, then by having that, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have that conviction of where you're going, right? So insecurity, right? By that insecurity, it translates into our body, right? And we start doing this because we don't know where we need to sort of aim for. We don't know the intention of our bow, right? And we find our sort of pulsing each note. So I think having a clear sense of phrasing, even on the small scale, on the micro level, really sort of will get rid of 90% of your portato. Now, the other part of that is speaking each note. I think that's maybe something different than portato. I feel like usually portato has a negative connotation where, it's something that's not conscious or unwanted. But sometimes we do want to, speak notes under our bow, under our hand, so that they're clear. I remember working on Bartok 5, the last movement, and I just couldn't get it to sound clear, like all the notes, whatever the notes are. And I remember taking it to playing it for Kee-hyun Kim, who's the cellist of the Bordeaux Quartet, and she said she really gave me something so helpful. She said to speak it under your bow, right? Right. So to in fast passages like that, to sort of have another impulse, yada-dum, not yada-dum, but yada-dum. Look at my index finger, yada-yum, So speaking it under your bow, obviously that's a very intentional thing, very different than unintentional portato. So hopefully that was helpful to you. Great. Question from Lucas. What advice can you give to young quartets in terms of playing freely within the meter of the music and at times pushing and pulling with tempo? Oh man, it's not just young quartets. I think any, even my quartet sometimes really finding, the freedom within boundaries, within meters is something that we're always looking for. I don't know. I think having an understanding of large scale structure, where again phrasing, where you want to go in a phrase, right? If you want to go, if this is the phrase and you want to go here, then you can't be like stopping here and smelling all the flowers and stopping here, before getting to the top of the phrase, because then we lose, the larger arc. And so I think figuring out your phrasing is one thing, is the first thing. And then also defining how you're counting, right? Are we counting in 4? Let's say it's 4/4, but are we counting in 4? Are we counting in 2? Or are we feeling it in 1? I think that really gives different meanings to in different ways that we can sort of find freedom within those boundaries. And then finally, as a practical step, maybe 2 things: working with the metronome. I remember Don Wallerstein said something to us, play chamber music with the metronome, which I found, super corny, but also super true. Really not thinking of it as an absolute thing dictating every beat, but something that actually, by the way I play, I can play around with, again, playing within the boundaries of these larger boundaries. And so we can do that in our own individual practice. So I feel like as a group, you can sort of find that together if you do some metronome work as a group together. And usually, I would work from smaller beats to larger beats. And then the other practical thing is maybe having one person lead a sense of rubato and timing. I remember, when we were starting out in the quartet, we would always start with a scale. We don't do that anymore, but we would always start with a scale. And then we sort of made up an exercise where we would have one person lead, right? And so, we could get really crazy with that. We can add accelerandos, retardandos, subito, dynamics, all these things, good tone, overpressure, all these different ways. And if you're really, really listening, you can sort of play along with that. And if you do that enough, I think you sort of develop trust within each other. And you sort of, with any group of people that you play with, right, you sort of understand their body language and how they're going to do a certain thing. So I think it's just a matter of practicing together and finding that together. Great. Let's see. Question from Michael. Do you have any tips on Ligeti solo sonata, especially in terms of musicality? Oh man, any tips? Let's see. Number one thing, let's see. I would say maybe just, again, find, okay, 2 things. And these are all things that I alluded to before. Find the sense of the gesture, right? So, right? Even in those 2 gestures, maybe was a question, maybe a response to that, and then maybe an affirmation, or it's just sort of finding the rhetoric of a group of notes. I think that's the first thing. And then let's see, finding a sense of gesture. And a lot of times I find that students because in solo pieces take a lot of freedom, take a lot of sometimes unnecessary freedom and unnecessary time, because they're like, oh, we don't have to play with anybody, we can be very free. And to a certain extent that's true. Music should feel in a way improvisatory, especially in these solo pieces, but the composer did write in these notes within a certain boundary of time. So at least when you're first approaching a piece, I would try to find the sense of gesture and timing within those sort of spatial boundaries of measure, right? And then see, oh, I think this, accelerates, intensifies in excitement or something. So then you can sort of speed up maybe a little bit, but really it comes from, you have to know where you're starting out from in order to find freedom within that. And so I think musicality is a hard thing to answer, but I think grounding yourself in the basics, right? Tempo and pitch and all that stuff is a great starting point. Great. So we have 4 minutes, and I'm going to try to answer these questions as quickly as I can. From Diego, do you have any advice for maintaining balance in the thumb position? I found that oftentimes my fingers will miss a string in their hand, will sometimes even fall off the fingerboard. Sure. Yeah, I think balance, I think, for example, for the A string, right? I feel that it's very easy to fall off the fingerboard. So sometimes I find that planting my thumb a little bit inward to the D string, right? Sort of that feeling, right? If we're playing a D octave, thumb is on the D harmonic, in the middle D, right? And so that really, I find is a good basic form. And then from there, I think really sort of centering your finger on centering the mass, the weight of your arm on the finger that's being played, whichever finger that is, I think is another good way to make sure you don't fall off the fingerboard and you feel connected to the fingerboard up here. And A string, it looks a little like this, D string a little bit deeper, and the most extreme C string, we will look like this, right? Not like that. We're not extending and reaching out our fingers, but again, I feel like I can apply gravity. Gravity is, keeping my fingers down. The weight of my arm and gravity, and the effect of gravity on the weight of my arm is keeping my hand more or less on the fingerboard. And a way to think about it is that you're sort of sinking through this, through this piece of wood here. Yeah. Okay. Can you discuss the process of developing your quartet's personal sound and sound character? Every great string quartet chamber has a sound that is identifiable, exactly who's playing without seeing them. Whether it's the Bordeaux or Cleveland quartets, how do you work on this and not become poor versions of our teachers or idols? I think that's sort of that's relevant to quartets and, to individual players as well. I think, man, that's another hard question to answer. One way, the first thought that comes into my mind is that when you work on a piece, you don't listen to a recording, right? And you try to find the sense of expression by yourself. But then the second thought actually is to listen to a lot of recordings, right? Listen to as many recordings of a piece that you can get your hands on, and sort of take note of what you like, maybe, and what you don't like. And, especially if you're, in high school or undergrad, trying to find your own individual voice, I think, getting that sort of sense of perspective is great. Having a sound in your ear that you aspire to is great. Now it becomes a problem if, you only have one person, like, let's say you grew up listening to Yo-Yo and, he's your favorite cellist and like, I want to be just like Yo-Yo. And then, so you listen only to his recordings. And so, I don't think anybody can ever sound like Yo-Yo, but, you get the point of what I'm saying. If that's all you listen to, then, that's what you're going to more or less emulate, but, and without finding your own sense of sound. And so I guess just listen to as many recordings of any piece that you like. It doesn't have to be cello, it can be violin or some other string instrument. It doesn't have to be quartets or solo pieces, right? And so figure out what it is that you like, and try to, and you can take that and make that yours, right? And I think that's maybe a good good building block. Definitely as, early on in your development. Question from Jeff. Do you have a warm-up routine that you use every day? Also, how do you work on refining intonation in particular? Apart from slow practice in the repertoire one's okay. The repertoire that one is playing. Okay, so warm-up routine that I use is that I've used for a very long time, and it's just, first of all, open strings. You know, the older I get, the more it takes me to actually warm up so that I'm not injuring myself. So I'll do, you know, open strings, concentrating on having a straight bow, having a consistent tone, having smooth bow changes, right? Using the momentum of a down bow to swing me through the up bow and vice versa, and making sure that I'm feeling grounded in my approach to the cello. So really that's, you know, the first thing, feeling grounded. And then I'll play a scale. If I have more time, I'll do whole bows, you know. And if I have even more time, you know, I'll put it on metronome and sort of do very, very careful work like that. But that's sort of, again, that's warming up this hand, the left hand with the right hand, and really finding the weight of my arm on the cello. Really, you know, without the variable of vibrato, right? So doing that. And then once I feel good, then I'll do, you know, vibrato. Really something, usually I'll go for a slow, lush vibrato, something very, very broad. If I don't have time, I'll go 2 notes to a bow. Now, the whole point of this is to warm up the left arm to make sure vibrato is working. And one thing I listen out for is the consistency of the vibrato amplitude. Obviously, between each finger, if I'm not thinking about it, they react in different ways, right? And so trying, by using my ear, I try to match the amplitude of each finger. And then one thing that I've been doing recently that I find fun is a variation of the Kosman exercises. And don't start out with this because you'll injure yourself. But once you feel pretty good, to work on dexterity, you know, that kind of stuff. And this sort of alludes to one of the first questions about the pinky. And I can practice really throwing my my pinky down. If you do that after maybe you know, like 30 seconds of it, you'll cramp up and it's not fun. So like I said, and I keep coming back to, make up exercises for yourself. You know your body, you know how it reacts, and so anything slow, think about working out, right? We gotta like get into it, right? We gotta do jumping jacks, we gotta get our heart rate up and stuff like that too. Same thing with the cello, just sort of slow, intentional movements, and you know, just have the patience for it because it will serve you well in the long run before you do anything very fast. And then for the second part of that question, refining intonation in particular, I think intonation is a big topic that we just don't have the time to get into right now. In the quartet, we use mostly just intonation, which is basically you know, using the intonation of the overtone series. For those of you guys have studied it, you'll realize that it's not, if you put it up against a tuner, that D, right, if it's in tune, then it'll, you know, the light will turn green, but then this F sharp will, on that same setting, will show very flat, right? So basically, that corresponds to, if we're playing a triad with a D major triad with an F sharp, the F sharp will not be equidistant from the D and the A, but will be lower and closer to the D for it to sound very round. So in a nutshell, that's sort of what using just intonation is. And you can read more about that. But anyway, so if you're playing in a quartet or, not with the piano, then you can sort of try to find your intonation using as many open strings as you can. If you're playing with a piano, knowing that the piano it's not even tempered, but you can always just sort of ask the pianist to sort of help you, just tune a certain section with the piano, or you can always use the metronome and put it on the tuner, I should say, tuner function, and try to find your intonation that way. I feel like when the quartet does intonation work, we spend about 10-15 minutes tops working on a very specific section, because more than that, our ears get fatigued and we get mad at each other and stuff like that too. And so just, again, very, very focused way of listening to intonation. And as long as you're really, really listening, and you're making sure you're doing things very consciously, then your body will retain that information, and your ear will constantly seek those sonorities. So careful practice is always the most important thing. Okay, so last question. How has your perspective, priorities as a musician, artist changed throughout your career? Oh man, that's a hard one. Obviously, as with anybody else in any profession, right? Living through this pandemic times, and not just pandemic, but social justice and all these issues, right? That are so at the forefront of everybody's minds, and it's affecting our daily lives. Obviously, COVID and racial inequality and all these things, I think, which sort of makes us question why we do what we do, and who do we do it for, and what's the point of playing music, of playing the cello, and I think obviously those thoughts are always evolving, but throughout the past 2 years, that has sort of developed exponentially, and I'm still in the process of figuring it out. But I think the first important thing to establish for yourself is do you love what you're doing, and why do you do what you do, and does it make you happy, does it bring you joy, and does communicating that joy to others also bring you joy? And I realized after a lot of introspection that answer was yes for me, and then once you have that conviction with yourself, then you have to ask yourself, what do I want to do with it? And what effect do I want my music to have? Are you just doing it because it's cool and you're good at it, and or because it's makes a certain amount of money, or for whatever reasons, you have to really figure that out for yourself, and realize and ask yourself, is that sustainable? Do I want to be doing that for the rest of my life? And I think these are all really, really deep questions that are that are very personal. Everybody has different reasons, and I'm definitely coming to those answers myself. But for the moment, I know that I love playing the cello, and I know that I have something that I'm semi good at, and that I can share that that love and that joy through my performance and through teaching. And so that's what I am doing. So I think that's the end of this session. I'm sorry if I couldn't answer to your satisfaction, your questions to your satisfaction. I'm trying to get through these questions quickly, but hopefully I gave you guys some nuggets to ponder over. So thank you, everybody. I hope you stay well, stay safe, get vaccinated if you haven't, and meet you on the other end. Take care.